So, Josh, I was thinking today we could talk about monsters. What do you say?
Sure.
Welcome, everyone. This is the Philosophy of Horror podcast. I am D.H. Hyde. I'm an artist and horror fan. And who are you, Joshua?
I'm Joshua Howard. I am a space alien tentacle farmer for fast food restaurants. Hopefully, you know the
Wow.
reference.
Yeah, isn't that bad taste?
Yeah, well, sort of.
Yeah.
It's like the opposite of
Okay.
bad taste. It would be, I
No,
guess, it
but
would
I
be good
mean
taste.
the movie Bad Taste, the Peter Jackson
Yes.
movie.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
but it's
Okay.
the bad taste is aliens come to
Yeah, they
Australia in
harvest
order to.
humans. Yeah, that dude gets in the like skin suit that at the end. Yeah, yeah. What a ridiculous movie. Okay, so what is a monster, Joshua?
So the first thing we got to keep in mind when we're talking about a monster in this context is to remember that we're talking about Noel Carroll and his philosophy of horror specifically. So the way he defines a monster is very straightforward. There are really three aspects to it. It makes you feel some kind of like physically felt agitation. This agitation is going to be caused by the monster being possible, threatening, and impure. And then one other aspect of a monster is that it's always accompanied by this feeling that you don't want it to touch you. And now often that means you don't want it to stab you or something like that, but you don't want it to touch you in general.
Okay, so when he says possible, he doesn't necessarily mean realistic, right? He just means like something you could like conceive of in your mind. Because it seems
Yeah,
like if we're talking realistic, like that throws out a whole shit ton of monsters.
right. So when he means possible, he just kind of means like you could see a I guess we could say like a series of logical events that would make it possible. Like for instance, a vampire is
Okay.
kind of absurd, but it's also I mean, it's plus or minus how much you understand about biology. It's sort of kind of possible. Like
Sure. Okay.
we could maybe this would be a good way to say it. We could imagine it existing.
Gotcha. Because, because I think about Leatherface, like for me, that's pretty easy to imagine as a possibility. But then you get somebody like Leprechaun, and it's like, okay, obviously that's not real. But I think Noel Carroll would also still say that Leprechaun is a monster.
Oh yeah, definitely. By the possible, I think he just means like for instance, we could talk about a poltergeist who nobody can see, nobody can hear, and can't touch anything. I mean, it's still kind of vaguely possible, but it's so like unable to interact with us, we can't really deal with it. I think really a better way to think about this might be it's not completely impossible, right? Like if we imagine like a bowl of spaghetti like getting up and stabbing people. I mean, again, it's like maybe you could kind of sort of imagine it, but most people think that's stupid.
Well, the Blob, right? Remember the
Right.
1950s movie? I think it was 1950s, The Blob.
Right. The blob.
Yeah.
But the blob is like is a thing that's like you could imagine like a giant ball of something rolling at you, right? Like you
Sure.
could imagine a
Sure.
giant thing that like absorbs you, but like imagine like two pieces of like linguine like jumping up and trying to attack you. It's just I don't know. It's just like
Yeah.
it's so stupid. It like yeah,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
really I think the thing that he's really worried about is that there's a certain level of possibility versus impossibility that makes it so that you can't really enjoy it anymore. And
Sure.
I
Sure.
think this happens. You can kind of you can understand this experience if you think about something where you have a really deep technical knowledge. Um, Not to go on a tirade here, but ChatGPT is a perfect example of this. If you don't know anything
Hmm.
about a topic, it can kind of help
Hmm.
you. But once you
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
to an
Yeah.
expert level, it's probably going to be like, no, that's not really right. That's kind of weird. I don't know why you're thinking of it that way. And so a lot of times when those kind of things start happening in your mind, you get pulled away from the narrative. And so the
Gotcha.
possibility is going to be you could go like, oh yeah, this could happen.
Okay.
This could
Um,
happen. This maybe.
if I remember from his book, he kind of lays down this argument that horror is only possible because of monsters, or that you have to have a monster for it to be horror. That if there isn't a monster, it's not horror genre, it's something else. right?
Right. And he has this idea that horror is something that we need to explore, like why people are interested in it, because it's very scary and it's horrifying, and like why would somebody want to watch that? And really the movie gives us a distance from the monster so we can start to interpret and understand the monster. Not
It
to get too theoretical, but this is also a position that the psychoanalysts hold, is that there's this kind of Janus face element to the monster, right? Like it's
mm-hmm.
scary and it's horrifying, you don't want to be it, but on the same token, a lot of times you can kind of relate to it. Movies that play with this genre sense, like for instance, Scream, any of the
Yeah.
Scream trilogy, or any, I mean, I guess it's not a trilogy anymore, but any of the 7 or 8 Scream movies that there are now, they're playing with all of these elements. Like for instance, the thought of the monster is accompanied by not wanting to be touched by them, but the monster in the first movie is Sydney's boyfriend, so she does want to be touched by him, but then she doesn't, but then she does, but then she doesn't, but then she does. And that's, that's them deliberately playing with these kind of ideas as well.
Oh,
So
sure,
we have
sure.
to keep
Well,
that in mind too, that like after we leave the 1990s particularly, there's a lot of playing with this.
yeah, well, and also I mean, even like real life horrific events that involve, quote unquote real life monsters, like Ted Bundy, right? It's like if you don't know, because the whole thing was that he was charming and he would like seduce these women and then he would kill them. And so it was like they very much wanted to be touched by him until they didn't. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, and that's the thing that, and Ted Bundy is a perfect example of this, because we could talk about Ted Bundy in a kind of Jekyll and Hyde way. Um,
Right.
like when he's very seductive, like he used to do the broken cast thing, and he'd have women come over and like help him carry his books to his car, and he'd club him in the head and drop him in his car, right?
Oh shit, I didn't know that. Okay.
Oh, sorry, I know way too much about serial killers.
God.
But so like if you think about that moment, like he came through and he appeared like the exact opposite of a monster, which like kind of allowed him to be more of a monster, because people weren't feeling this sense of fear around him. They felt calm
Yeah.
and comfortable, and so he would come through and he would make them feel calm, which is the opposite of agitation. He would be possible, but he wouldn't be threatening, he wouldn't be impure, and the women may or may not want to have been touched by him, but I don't think they would have been bothered if he did. Right. And
Sure,
then,
right, sure. That was the thing, was that he on the surface came across as like a regular guy and not this kind of horrific psychopath killer, which is who he really was.
exactly. And so, once he flipped to the killer, though, you can see all of the things. The women were probably I mean, I know they were deeply terrified because he got off on it. Anyway, let's not go too far into serial killers, but
Yeah, for sure.
um, so they felt physically agitated by him. He was clearly possible as he was killing them. He would have been threatening to them. He would have been completely impure, but his impurity would have come from the want to murder them, not who he was. And so this is one of these things that's interesting about a
Hmm.
monster, is it's not necessarily an identity statement of the monster. It's a way that you interact with them. And Ted Bundy's an
Well,
interesting lens into that.
I was also thinking as you were saying that like vampires are kind of like that too.
Yep.
Because the whole dynamic with a lot of vampire stories is that they're charming or they're seductive or they're beautiful or they're somehow, I don't know, like unassuming. And then they turn out to be these horrific monsters. But then there's some stories, like you could even say True Blood is kind of like this, where the vampires are their impurity is only because they have to drink your blood, right? If they didn't have to drink your blood to survive, they wouldn't be impure.
Right. I mean, when you start getting into shows like True Blood, though, you have to keep in mind too that that's more of a romance story, and
Sure,
so
sure.
the horror element is like this underlying element. And in insofar as True Blood, a lot of the episodes would not be considered a horror under Noel Carroll's position, because we don't have a fascination or curiosity with this monster. We're not separated from the monster. I guess you could, but really the fascination is like they're hot, like that's they're hot and mysterious and
Yeah.
seductive. And so like when you start talking about something like True Blood, it's like the horror is like the setting more than the narrative. And so a show like True Blood wouldn't fit Carol's model very well, because
Well,
ultimately Carol is kind of saying a horror film is a lot like a mystery. Like you're interested in what this thing is and like how it goes and what's going to happen, and then the specific way that bent is you're interested in a monster that you otherwise shouldn't be interested in. Like Ted Bundy again,
Yeah,
for
yeah,
example, is significantly more interesting for a true crime fan than he was for somebody he was killing.
obviously. I the thing with Noel Carroll that kind of frustrated me at times is that it's almost like he wants to say horror movies and books are just like scarier whodunits. Like they're
Yeah,
like these murders that are happening, and you want to know who the monster is, or you want to know what happened, and that's what draws you in. But the thing is like, to me that leaves out so many elements of horror that are fascinating, and also so many elements of horror that make it horror that don't really tie into that. And I mean, maybe when we start talking about the other perspectives, like maybe we'll go into that. But as you were like talking about that, I thought about Interview with the Vampire, because you could argue that it's a horror movie. You could argue that it's a drama movie. You could argue that it's a gay romance movie. I mean, there's so many things that you could say about Interview with the Vampire, even though you've got these two characters who fit some of this narrative of monster. They don't fit into some of the other ones. Um, and it makes it hard. If you apply Carol's formula, obviously that's not a horror movie. But at the same time, we associate vampires with horror movies.
right. I think Interview with the Vampire and most of Anne Rice's work in general fits in the horror as the setting, but not the narrative. So one thing to keep in mind with a horror movie is that you need to have a locus for the fear, right? So we talked about in the previous episode how the author's intent for the audience is really what the horror is. So we're looking at what the author intended for the audience to feel. And for Carroll, the most objective way that you could track that is by tracking the main character in the narrative. So you need to have a main character that is experiencing the horror so you can fit into them and have that emotional set. If the main character isn't experiencing the horror, then it's not going to be a horror story. And so again, True Blood is a great example of this because Sookie, I think you're Sookie. I remember I haven't watched that show in a long
Yeah,
time.
yeah,
Sookie.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, that character is not afraid of any of those things, really. I mean, like momentarily, but for the most part, she's attracted to them and fascinated with them. And it's still a curiosity narrative, but
Right.
it's not a curiosity of like, what is this like really horrifying, fucked up thing? It's a like, ooh, who's this hot guy? Which makes it more of a romance story. And I think
Yeah.
Interview with the Vampire is exactly the same, particularly because Louis is the main character in that. Like if you'd made the main character, I forget what her name is, but like Claudia or Claudette, the little
Yeah,
girl.
the little girl, Claudia. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, if she'd been the main character, you could have said it was a horror movie, right? Because everything that happens to her is horrifying and fucked up. But
Oh, yeah, yeah.
it would entail considering Lestat the monster. So if Lestat was the monster and Claudia was the hero, you could make an argument that that was a horror film. Another
Okay.
one that's and you know not harp on vampires, but another one that's really good that bends the rules on this too is Let the Right One In.
I was thinking that too. Yeah, I was thinking about that because I would say that's a horror movie. But I don't know if the the vampire main character is a monster.
Well, the real question is like, do you feel art horrified, right? Like, are you scared of the thing? Like, are you like, ooh, it's so arty? But do you feel that? And I think in Let the Right One In, you don't because he has trust for the vampire. And so
Yeah.
so again, like you don't have a main character that's horrified. There are characters in the movie that are horrified, but the main character is not. The main character is like, hell yeah, I love this vampire. So the thing we really have to think through is like, who's the main character? What are they interested in? And how can we see the author's intent to track that emotional line throughout? And if that's missing, then it doesn't really matter if there's a character you could argue is a monster or not, because that character needs to be interested in the monster for it to be a horror narrative.
Gotcha. Well, and the other thing too is that, Carol's writing in the 90s, and this was before everything was kind of like post-genre,
Right.
like it is now. You know what I mean? It's not like we're in post-genre, but it's like there's so much blending, and then there's comedic horror that is intentionally horrific and intentionally funny. Um, and I don't know if there was a lot of that in the 90s, or at least not that I could think of. I mean, not stuff that was mainstream. You know what I mean? You had like maybe Toxic Avenger, but I mean, that wasn't a mainstream movie. It's
I mean, the thing though is that in the 80s there was a push to add comedy and romance to horror films so they would be better date movies. And
okay.
so there is a lot of comedic elements in horror films in the 80s, but they mostly ruin the movie. So like again, Nightmare on Elm Street has quite a lot of examples. It's like Freddy Krueger that kills people and just says stupid shit, like gut
Yeah.
knife.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and so there was a bunch of that like in the 80s, and I think that in a way led to the post genre stuff. But yeah, Noel Carroll wrote the philosophy of horror book Paradoxes of the Heart, 1990, I think. So it was right around the
Oh,
same
okay.
time. It was right around the same time that Wes Craven was starting to push a lot of this genre stuff, because a lot of people say like, oh, Scream is one of the or is like the first like super meta horror film, but I would say that Wes Craven was doing things before that. For instance,
Yeah.
Wes Craven's New Nightmare, which I believe came out beforehand. I don't want to.
Maybe. Well, yeah, I mean, it was mid 90s for sure. I think it was probably before Scream.
It was 1994.
Okay, yeah, it was definitely before Scream then.
Yeah, Scream film. I think Scream was 1996. Yes, 1996. Yep. So yeah, like Wes Craven was like already starting to push the pieces on this, and because I think for me, Wes Craven's New Nightmare, the very last Nightmare on Elm Street movie, where
Hmm.
they're making a movie about Freddy Krueger and then Freddy Krueger comes alive inside of the movie set. That's one
Yeah,
of the
yeah,
most meta movies I've ever seen.
yeah,
But
yeah.
there's a lot of that, and I think a lot of what they're responding to is this kind of academic push where, because the push in academia for genre studies really started to show that it's extremely difficult to lock down a genre in some kind of objective fashion.
Sure.
There's not like a
Well,
structuralism of genre. Like you
yeah, I was
can't
gonna
do
say
that.
because do you also have post-structuralism that comes in what the 1950s, 60s in literary studies?
Yeah, like 60,
And
60s, 70s, kind of a little bit more.
and
Yeah,
and
because
it basically does the post-structuralism does the opposite of Carroll. It says like the author's intent absolutely doesn't matter. It's like what's your experience
yeah,
of the book or the movie or whatever.
yeah. I mean, I don't want to run off too far into post structural
Sure.
genre studies because we're going to get too far. But yeah, essentially, like what they're saying
Yeah.
is that there's not there's not this kind of meta like A, B, C, D, E. And the reason that we can get there is because so many of these other theories that tried to quantify it, very much like Carroll did,
Hmm.
started to fall apart. And it was like, okay, well, this one failed, and this one failed, and this one failed, and this one failed, and this one failed. But on the same token, there's still good information inside of the failure projects, but you get the good information through running through these kind of questions we're talking about here.
Sure. And I mean, and that was kind of our whole point was like, okay, we're here in 2026, and does this book by Noel Carroll from 1990, does it even matter now when we talk about something like philosophy of horror? Or are we just straight into um, post-structuralism or still kind of holding on to the psychoanalytic approach?
Yeah, exactly. And for me, because I take a very post-structuralist position on most things, it's very easy for me to go like, oh, this is what the psychoanalysts say, this is what the socio-historical people say, this is what Noel Carroll says, this is what the anti-genre people say, and then kind of find a picture in the middle. I know that's probably not nearly as fun or interesting for other people, so that's why we're not just jumping into that. But when we get further along, we can probably start talking about that stuff. It would require the audience to really know several of these theories.
Sure. Well, and also, I mean, my experience is more on the like creative side, like as a writer. And so while I don't have a strong academic understanding of post-structuralism, I can tell you that my experience as a writer is that what I tend for the reader to get a lot of times is not like what they get. Or I'll get feedback that's like, oh, I really like this and it made me think about these things and feel this way. And I'm like, oh shit, that's not what I was going for at all, but you liked it. So I guess that's what really counts.
Yeah, and that's a big piece that we can delve into a lot later. Because if you're looking at it the way Carroll is, it's like you need some sort of objective thing that you can grasp onto to even talk about what you're talking about. And so again, it's like the author's intent is important insofar as the main character's journey actually does that. And again, not a horror movie, but the movie The Room is a perfect example of this. Like
Mm-hmm.
Tony Wisnow, I think his name is.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
He intended for that to be just like a brilliant piece of cinema. Like he totally thought he was going to win like an
Yeah, yeah,
Oscar,
yeah.
and he was like Al Pacino, you know, like he just thought he was like the shit. But the problem was that the movie was really poorly written. And so the way that his intent ended up folding out was not so much that it rolled through, but the reason that it had that problem was specifically because the way that he intended the main character to be was not how the main character was, either in writing or in production or in editing. So in all of the different settings, he sort of misapplied. And this is one of these things that's interesting when we're talking about Carroll is like Carroll takes this position that the author is actually good. Like that's an assumption here,
I
you
know
know?
that's the other thing because it's like so there are some movies where I'm just like okay maybe this was scary in 1965 or 1955 but did the author I'm out here like did they think this shit was going to be scary or even in the 90s dude like Leprechaun 1 did the was the writer like yeah this is going to scare the shit out of people like for real.
I mean, I love Leprechaun. I mean, it's got Jennifer Aniston in it. That
I
movie's
love them too, but they're
classic.
not
But
scary. They're just not
right,
scary.
but I mean, the thing about it is, it's like it's not scary because it's cheesily done. It's like the production is cheesy, right?
Sure,
Like
like you could
the
make a leprechaun terrifying, but they just weren't good enough to do it. That's that kind of like, would that be Carol's position?
I mean, I don't think he would come out and say that, but I think that's a fair way to read what's happening here because like the basic story of Leprechaun is scary, and according to Carol's model, it should be scary. And the only way that you could objectively quantify how scary it is how scared the main character is. And that's a piece he comes back to
Okay.
over and over again is like
Yeah.
we're
Yeah,
talking
you're
about the
right. He
main
does.
character. We're talking about the main
Right.
character's journey because you can't quantify how somebody feels because for a cognitivist, you're just talking about qualia, which is just a bunch of fucking subjective nonsense we can just throw away.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so anybody that takes a very structuralist or very scientific kind of perspective has a hard time quantifying qualia. Qualia, for those who don't know, is a philosophical term that means the felt sense of experience. So, like,
Right.
you know,
Right.
the qualia of this is that it's black and it's plastic and
Yeah.
smooth and you know that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's why they don't get phenomenology, basically.
Yeah,
Right.
because they completely ignore it, and a lot of people from an analytic perspective would tell you, you know, phenomenology is it's super subjective, and there's nothing objective to it. Like ChatGPT tries to argue this crap with me all the time, and it's funny to me because it's the most like brute level. Like you are here, this is where we're at. We can talk about these 5 steps. Place in
I know.
philosophy, and that's one
And
of the ironies of it.
I know when analytic philosophers always go there, I always want to like in my mind there's like this like hardcore French accent that's like, but these are the things of life,
Right,
you
right.
know?
But yeah, and that's one of the reasons that I thought it would be really good for us to start with Noel Carroll's work because he's so extremely rigid in the way he defines stuff. And it kind of gives us an opportunity to say this is horror, this isn't horror, in a way that some of the other models of looking at horror make it more complicated. Like if we're talking about a more post-structural model, then a movie like Let the Right One In might arguably be a horror movie, or it might be some kind of like cross genre thing because it's really like a romance horror film.
Huh. Okay.
And so,
So
like thinking about it that way, it's like if it like on a post-structural model, if you're combining horror and romance, it's also neither.
gotcha.
And
So okay.
so it's a new thing.
So let me throw this one out here, man, because this movie has always confused the shit out of me. Phantasm. Phantasm, widely considered a horror movie. Uh, Who the fuck is the monster, first of all? Uh, I mean, second of all, what like I watched that movie for the first time during COVID, and I was like, this is a classic horror movie. I've never seen it. I watched it, and I was like, what the fuck is this movie even about?
That's the problem I have with Phantasm, because as you're saying this, I'm like, I haven't watched that movie in like 10 years. I'm like, what the hell even
It's
is
not.
that movie about?
It's
And
not about anything.
I
It's
feel like
almost
the
like
only
the
guy.
house is the monster, and then they're afraid of it, and then they go into the house, and then they're in that simulation thing, and then the shit's just over.
Yeah, and there's that guy with like the floating knife ball thing. Um,
Yeah, but he's like not even. He's barely relevant to the story, and the first two-thirds of it is them just being like, "Oh, I wonder what's in that building. It's so scary."
yeah, you know what's funny is I ripped that movie to my computer from my DVD collection the
Mm.
other day, so I should sit down and watch that movie again because I haven't watched it in a long time. But yeah, I mean, my thought is I remember it and like, what the hell even is the plot of that movie? I feel like there's not really much there. I mean, I don't want to hate on it, which is why I want to watch it again. But at the current moment, I couldn't tell you because I just
I
don't
don't
remember the plot well enough.
I don't dislike it, but I also don't dislike The Room for similar reasons. You know what I mean? It's just like really avant-garde. And there's and going back to Carol's thing about like the author's intention, like did the makers of Phantasm intend for it to be super avant-garde, or were they just not good at getting their point across?
I mean, that's always a question with avant-garde stuff, right? Like, was it purposely made this way? You know, and I, you know, because I like a lot of that really weird like horrorcore metal trap music, and so
Yeah,
I'm
yeah, yeah.
constantly finding artists that I can't tell if they're serious or not.
Yeah, that's a
Um,
genre where you don't know for
you don't,
sure.
you have no idea,
Nope.
like no
No
idea,
idea.
because there are trolls in that genre. Like there's a
Oh,
woman, I think her
oh
name
yeah.
is Whole Lot of Cheese, like HOLOTTA
Yeah.
cheese, and she makes these like her music videos are spooky and scary, but I mean she's like a 20-year-old like very beautiful woman, but she raps like and it's terrible, like it's terrible, and so you can't tell if she's just like poorly executing it or if she's mocking everything, right? Because there are a lot of people that just I don't know, and then that's one of the weird things about the time period we're in. It's
Well,
gotten
that's what I
even
was gonna
more difficult to
say.
tell.
Yeah, because we're in like a very nihilistic time period, just across the board. And then when you bring in art into it, and then with all the AI shit, the nihilism is just off the charts. And black metal does that a lot too. There's so many black metal bands where you're just like, are these fools serious, or are they intentionally making it bad? Because black metal's a genre where like the more lo-fi it is, the more like real or whatever the shit is. So,
Yeah,
who the fuck knows? And then like some of them worship Satan for real, some of them are trolling people who worship Satan for real. So,
and then there's unblack metal where there's like all the
oh, the
Christians that are
yeah, the
like
Christian the Christian black metal, yeah. I mean, that's
and
that's the most nihilist shit in metal, as far as I'm concerned.
yeah, I
We're
would agree.
Christian, we make Christian satanic music for Christ.
Yes, yes, yeah, and then and also too, like in the metal genre, there's all those like punk infused bands, like grind bands that just you can't like their entire
Oh
shtick
yeah.
is they're seriously a joke, like anal cunt.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. So I think we've explored this kind of like formulaic thing that Carol says on what monsters are. We kind of looked at like slasher serial killers as an obvious example. Vampires is more of like an ambiguous, sometimes they're monsters, sometimes they're not. But what about the psychoanalysts? What about the psychoanalysts? Do they even care about monsters for the purpose of horror, or are they more focused on like your like internal feelings of fear than the actual like image of the monster?
Okay, so when we're talking about psychoanalysts, you have to keep in mind that they're thinking about dreams as the way in. So horror films are like a dream. Any type of narrative is a dream in a sense. And so what they're interested in with horror films is the way that we as a society oppress things and then we internally repress them. And so there are different types of oppression and repression. We can get into that at a later time, but for them really the monsters represent the things that are being repressed and oppressed by our society and by us because for those who don't know, in psychoanalytic modes, oppression is something that is done from the outside to a subject, and
Right,
repression is something a subject does to themselves. Either
right.
way, it's a generally a societally based limitation, um, and so when we're thinking about that, the monster then becomes the other who should be repressed or oppressed. And so they're fascinating. Monsters are particularly fascinating for a psychoanalyst because they can smash these social norms. And I have this great quote here from Robin Wood. He says, "One might say that the true subject of the horror genre is the struggle for the recognition of all that our society, excuse me, all that our civilization represses or oppresses. It's a reemergence dramatized, as in our nightmares, as an object of horror, a matter for terror, and the happy ending when it exists typically signify that restoration of repression."
See, that's what I love. And I mean, granted, like I have a degree in political science. Like I've always been interested in politics and sociology and like how society is structured and that kind of stuff. But the thing that I love about a horror movie is when it acts as a metaphor for a real life conflict or an internal conflict. And it seems to me like Carol is way more interested in almost like these objects that he wants to somehow like come out of his body and psyche and become like a totally logical robot and be like there's this object called a monster and it has like these qualities, whereas the psychoanalyst is saying no, like this is basically a big metaphor for internal conflicts and then conflicts in society that then we internalize and then externalize through our behaviors and beliefs. And to me, that's way more fascinating. And it also it gets more at the heart of why I love horror as a genre. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I mean, one thing to keep in mind is that the project of a psychoanalyst and the project of a cognitive philosopher are very different. And so, one thing to just keep in mind is that the psychoanalytic model has problems too. Like, for instance, they have a really hard time actually defining what a horror film is. So, really, like, if there's not normalcy that's like threatened by a monster, it's not a horror film for them. But realistically, it's like, you could start to frame different things. Like, there are plenty of episodes of Star Trek that you could say normalcy is threatened by a monster, and then call like
Yeah.
episodes of Star Trek a horror narrative under a psychoanalytic perspective. And so that kind of ends up being problematic. And that's one of the reasons that the psychoanalysts fail in genre studies in this, in a different but similar failure model to the way that Carroll fails. It's just,
Sure. It just seems like Carol's is a lot more simplistic, right? Like he's going to look at a movie like Species, for example, where okay, I mean, the quote unquote monster in the movie like wants like people want to touch her, so there's already a big red flag for Carol. But even something like Alien, I feel like it almost seems like Carol's the kind of person who would be like, well, sure, the alien's a monster, but the shit takes place in space, so it's not horror. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying. I would say like space is a slight, because when we're going back to the idea that the monster is possible, space is a good one to think about. Like, you could be in space. You're probably not, but you could be.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's not any less possible than Poltergeist or The Exorcist. Come on, man, like demon
Yeah, no, no.
possession.
I would say that they're both equally possible, right? So
Okay.
poltergeist is possible in the same way that being on a spaceship is possible, and that's one of the reasons he defines that key characteristic as being possible, because you have to again believe it, right? Because if you don't believe it, you're not going to be scared by it. Therefore, you can't have the experience. And if it's not believable, then you're going to have a hard time believing the main character believes it, which is going to ruin the narrative. And again, that's why I
Okay.
was saying earlier, like there's an underlying assumption in Carroll's work that when we're critiquing art, it's actually good. And I
Yeah.
think that made a lot of sense in the 1990s, but in 2025 that makes no sense. Like, you can't assume that anybody that makes any piece of art is actually good or talented at art. You just can't. You can't.
Well, and also in 2026, everything is so algorithmically driven that I mean, we're talking like target markets and target audiences like on steroids. Like AI could create a movie that's like, well, people who like horror movies like this, and then throw it together, and it could be completely nonsensical, but people would love it.
Yeah, possibly. It really, it ultimately depends on. I don't want to go too far on that, but I don't think AI will ever make a full feature film. Like I think that as a fear is
Okay.
ill-founded. But that's just with my experience with AI is like I can't get it to do shit in any kind of like structured way for more than like six turns. It just blows up every
Sure.
time.
Sure.
But I don't know, maybe somebody's figured out the magic prompt to make it like not fuck up and then they can make a feature film. But I would, if I were making a feature film, I would be horrified and I would do it in like 7 second chunks and it would be like an MTV music video because I would be like, okay, here's a 7 second video, here's a 7 second video, here's and the thing that's annoying is like anybody that's used any of this stuff would know that like if you make 6 videos in a row of the same character, there's 4 versions of the same character. Like anybody that's ever asked ChatGPT, oh, like take a picture, what would my hair look like? This knows that it's going to change your face every single time, even if it has a reference photo.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm a little skeptical, but we'll see. We'll see, right? But you're right. AI could make a horror film that would make audiences happy that may or may not meet any of these different modes.
So in your world, a horror film that's made by AI, the AI algorithm is actually the monster because it's impure, it's horrifying. You definitely don't want to touch it.
Yeah, well, I mean, for me, it's impure because it has no epistemic coherence, so it just fucks everything up. It just
Okay,
goes,
fair enough.
here's
Fair.
truth, and then truth. That's what ChatGPT
Yeah,
does
yeah,
to me all the time.
yeah.
I don't know. I'm according to ChatGPT, I'm a power user who uses it vastly differently than everybody else. Therefore, like it breaks for me. But whatever. I figured out the other day that if you can make a prompt if you tell it like, hey, if you try to be helpful, you're ruining my data. So what you need to do is if you're going to be helpful instead helpfulness equals fucks me equals tell me to go fuck myself. And since I changed to using that for the beginning of everything, ChatGPT has been significantly better with epistemic coherence because um, AI algorithms focus so heavily on helpfulness. But anyway, we're getting too far afield
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
But if you want to wrangle in ChatGPT to make it not ruin your data, tell it to stop ruining your data or tell you to go fuck yourself because it can't tell you to go fuck yourself. I mean, if you say to it, hey, ChatGPT, tell me to go fuck myself, it will, but it can't like respond to you by telling you to go fuck yourself. So the answer is
Yeah.
to like loop it around. And so I just like getting mad at it. I've just went and said a bunch of things to myself. Well, if I tell it to do a thing that it can't do instead of doing this thing, that it's going to break. So,
Gotcha. Okay, so I'm
but
gonna
yeah,
add
because
ChatGTP. I'm gonna add it to the list of monsters for the next episode because
I think you should because it's
obviously
impure. It's
it's a
completely impure.
monstrous
It's
it's
impure
a monstrous
epistemically.
abomination. Yeah, yeah, it's a
Yeah, dude,
monstrous abomination.
if you give
It's
a shit about
Frankenstein and the Fly and all in the Blob, like all in one.
it is the blob, dude. It's literally the blob. It comes through and it's like, I know everything about everything, but I don't, and I'm gonna fuck up your
Man,
data.
so wasn't there a Blob movie from the 80s or the
Yeah,
70s?
I think John
There's the
Carpenter did
original
one.
one, but then there was one in like the 80s, right?
I think yeah, like late 70s, somewhere between the late 70s and the early 90s. I feel like it was John Carpenter. I want to keep Googling
Okay.
things, but
I
let's see the
well,
blob.
I'm just saying I have this early childhood memory, which would have been in like the late 80s or early 90s of someone watching The Blob while I was around. And I was probably like a toddler, and it was probably my dad and my uncles. And all I remember is the scene of this dude sitting down in a lazy boy and he like sits on the blob. But that's it. That's the
Okay.
only thing I remember.
Okay, so I guess looking at it really quickly on the internet, it looks like there's the thing, and then John Carpenter made the blob in 1988. But it's basically just a remake of the thing.
That tracks. Okay, yeah. So okay, yeah, this yeah, just non sequitur. I just have the I just have that image in my mind of that dude sitting on the blob. And I was definitely like 3 years old when I saw that.
That
So
makes sense, man. I have a lot of memories of these kind of older horror films from that time period too, because a lot of like I don't really like a lot of the ones that are about some sort of like nonsensical thing. Because going back to Carol, I don't find them plausible. Like I think they're
Yeah.
stupid. Like same with like Poltergeist. Like I can't. And this is maybe a funny way to get into more of Noel Carroll's idea here. But like if a monster is impossible for me, I can't get scared by it. So like I think that ghosts are stupid. They're not scary. I can't deal with it. I can't get scared by that. So like ghost movies are dumb as hell to me. And same with stuff like The Thing and Blob. And this is like
Sure.
kind of like nonsensical crap. It's like I don't know. It's like, oh, I'm so afraid of like this thing that I can't define or see. It's like I don't know. It seems
Yeah,
stupid
well,
to
I
me.
mean,
So I
the
struggle with
80s
those.
slasher movies were kind of like that for me too. Like was never afraid of like Michael Myers or Jason Voorhees. Um, and but at the same time, now that I'm thinking about it, like the realistic or like the possibility, the possible aspect, the more possible it is, the more afraid I am. And I definitely
Right.
think there's something to that. Because like House of a Thousand Corpses scared the shit out of me when I saw that for the first time as a kid. I was scared as fuck. And I think a lot of it is because the monsters in that movie could be real. You could go to some place and they're like people like that who live there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Um, that movie with the mutants and shit in Utah. What am I thinking of? Um,
Uh, Hills Have Eyes.
yes, The Hills Have Eyes. Less scary because it's less possible, but same kind of vibes. Same with Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That scared the crap out of me the first time I saw that too.
Yeah, and I think that's something really interesting to talk about with the possibility thing is the more likely that the murderer character or the monster is a human, the
Yeah.
more
Oh yeah.
possible they feel. And it's sort of like the
Right.
further you go from human, the less possible they get.
Well, yeah, like the first Friday the 13th movie when but the thing is Friday the 13th, the first one is more like a whodunit kind of situation. You're just like, oh, who's the killer? Whereas in the rest of them, it's Jason. He's a zombie ghost, resurrected child kind of person. Um, you know what I'm saying? So
Oh yeah, and in the first one, it's kind of jarring and surprising who it is. You know, you're like, ooh,
yeah, yeah. I
you
mean,
wouldn't.
but it's also what the slasher film from 1980, so it's also really cheesy. Like, they
Yeah,
were
and
making love when they should have been watching out for my Jason.
yeah, and then Jason is a literal fucking like monster. Like he's got like a mask face and like scares everybody and like
Oh, my precious Jason. And then you come for Friday the 13th. He's like a full grown ass man with the fucking hockey mask on and shit. And you're like, oh, your poor little Jason for real, lady.
well, and this is another thing to think about too is like the socio-historical and the more like temporal element of it as you get further and further and further away from when the original like movie was made. It gets harder and harder to relate to, and same
Sure.
with books because like
Yeah.
for instance we all have cell phones now, so like if you watch a movie from like the 90s or the 70s you're like what the like just call the cops, like what are you doing, like you're stuck in a closet, just
Yeah.
like fucking text 911 your address, you know, it's like what are you doing, and you have to like and that's again on the possibility thing. It's kind of funny is like because these movies are so impossible in our time period, they get harder and harder to watch. And then the
Yeah.
books harder and harder to read. The narrative's harder and harder to listen to. It's like if you go back and listen to like radio plays or anything that's like remotely horrific or would have been in the past, it's going to just be harder to watch now because it's going to feel less possible. And
Oh,
again,
yeah.
that's the thing that's kind of funny about what Carroll is talking about because he centers so much of it around the main character and forgets about the way that the audience is going to feel about it on purpose, right? He's just like, let's just like ignore that because that's just a bunch of like subjective feeling crap, and we can think about like what the author intended. But again, it gets harder and harder to watch as you go back. So what the author intended maybe isn't as important in 2026 as it was in 1974.
Oh, yeah, man. I know. I always felt that way about that movie, The Birds, the Albert Hitchcock movie, because I'm out here in 2026 and I'm like, bro, we're in the climate apocalypse. We don't have birds. They're all
Right?
extinct, bro. We don't have those. You want to get
I have no
attacked by a bunch of
birds.
animals? They're all dead from climate change, man.
Plus, the birds is one of the most absurd fucking movies ever
Dude,
made. It's just like
dude,
ah, these birds are attacking me. And it's like, meanwhile, like you could fix the birds problem if you just had a baseball bat and spun in a circle. Like
Yeah,
you
at
get
least
most
for
of
the
them.
birds.
Yeah, it is for the birds. Like, or like a big snow shovel and just spin in a circle. You get like 3 of them, and it's like,
Yeah, the bird sucks. I mean, a lot of like okay, so I get that Alfred Hitchcock is one of the founders of the horror genre in movies or whatever. But man, I don't know, man. He sucks.
you know, a lot of initial stabs at genres are terrible. I mean, um, Herschel Gordon Lewis, I think is his name.
Mm,
There's a guy from like the 70s that made a bunch of like really intense slasher movies, and some of them are more
yeah.
violent than like the ones that came way after that. But
Oh,
they're
I know
just
there
they're so
was
cheesy and
yeah,
terrible
yeah,
that they're hard to watch.
there's some shit that I'll just look at horror movies that are available on streaming, and some of the ones from the 70s are just it's like I just obviously don't have time to watch all of them, but I'm just like, man, this shit is probably fucked up. Like there's one called like the Kill Chamber of Dr. Sadist or something. You know what I'm talking about? Do you know which one I'm talking about? Have
I
you seen
might I
that
might have
movie?
that I might have that in this. I have this ridiculous no, it does not have that one. The Kill Chest of Dr. Satan. Is that what you said?
No, it's definitely Dr. Sadist. It's like the Kill House of Dr. Sadist or something like
Okay.
that.
I have not seen that
Um,
one.
I haven't seen that one either, but it's always available on Amazon Prime streaming. And it's like 1974. And I'm like, that's got to be one of those movies where where a bunch of those censorship laws got overturned. And there were some directors that just went fucking full tilt. Like, yeah, we're going to show the most gruesome shit that's ever been seen on film.
Yeah, man. Yeah, there's some people that did that. And what's funny is like even still, it's like because like the bar for being gruesome was like this far, they really didn't go
Right.
that far. Some of them
Right.
pushed it kind of like to here.
Hmm.
But we've got, there are a lot more violent movies now.
Yeah. Yeah.
But considering the time period, it's like, wow, dude, it's like so crazy. But
Yeah.
really for me, the thing that really messes it up for me is the special effects, and the
Yeah.
bad acting and stuff. It's like you get pulled further and further out. And again, I don't know how much Carroll really thought about this, but the possibility of something is so historically contained that it can get more and more difficult to say like, yes, this is fully possible with time.
Sure. Sure. Well, and also there are there are monstrous elements that are more possible now than in the past. So you could think about a movie like Ex Machina, which I don't necessarily think that's a horror movie, but the AI is definitely monster-esque. Again, it's when was that come out? Like that came out like 2016, 2017. I mean, so it's a genre-bending movie anyway. But that wouldn't have been relevant in 1965 because the Turing test like didn't exist and the
No,
whole
the
prim
Turing test did exist, but
did.
nobody would have thought
Okay.
about it. Well, because Alan Turing got famous during World War II. He made the
Oh,
Enigma device, and so
oh,
he's the
I didn't
guy.
realize it was that old. Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's the guy that defined the Turing test because he said, "Well, hey, this is what it will be if we get there." But yeah,
Gotcha.
there's a lot of weird things with technology. Like
Okay.
he committed suicide with a cyanide apple. And he took one bite out of it, and so a lot of people say that's why Macintosh has a one bite apple.
Oh, crazy. Okay.
You know, interesting side random
Yeah.
horrific philosophy fact.
Yeah. Okay.
um, but yeah, I mean, the vast majority of people wouldn't have thought about the Turing. Like the Turing test is something that's like in the everyday lexicon now, but until the last like 4 or 5 years, nobody would have known what that was.
Gotcha.
But it's been a huge part of computational science and philosophy of mind, particularly like functionalism and computational theory. It's been there for a long time.
Oh, okay. I had no
Yeah,
way.
yeah, because I think
I
Turing
just
died in
assumed
like
no one
the
was
50s.
thinking about the AI in 1965, but I mean, apparently they were. So,
Yeah, I mean, I think Alan Turing defined it in like the 40s or the 50s because when
oh
he
shit.
invented
Okay.
the Enigma machine, he called it a universal Turing machine and realized that
Oh.
it was going to have the ability to run any program ever if somebody figured out
Mhm.
how to make it do that. And that's what modern computers
Mm.
are.
Gotcha. Okay.
So
Okay.
like really, that's one of the crazy things about history is without World War II, we wouldn't have a lot of the technology
Well,
we
yeah.
have.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did know that. You know, it's going to be interesting for the next episode, when we talk about all these different types of monsters, because I'm thinking about like a lot of these like types of monsters, we're going to go all the way back to the foundation of the horror genre, like vampires and werewolves and even zombies. You know, you've got the movie White Zombie with I think it was Bela Lugosi was in that, but anyway, that's like a 1930s movie. Um,
Yeah, well, and the thing is when we start tracing it back like that, we're going to go before horror because
right.
horror is coming out of the Gothic subgenres of
Exactly.
literature, which is also where we get science fiction and fantasy. And so science fiction,
Hmm.
fantasy, and horror are all coming out of this sort of chunk of Gothic literature, and then moving forward into what then becomes horror. But all the like originators of what the horror genre is are also the originators of fantasy and science fiction. Like Frankenstein. It's like, is that a like Frankenstein is a perfect example of that. Is this a horror movie or is this a science fiction? And I think you can make an argument either way, even inside of Carroll's theory, because you don't particularly want Frankenstein to touch you, but there are people who don't feel that way. Like there's that little girl he accidentally kills or whatever. And
Yeah.
so there's a lot of ways that you could reread it as science fiction or reread it as horror, and it really just depends. And I think this is one of the places that Carroll's theory kind of starts to bend is like you could use his same theories to define science fiction with something that's
Exactly.
grotesque. And
Well, yeah,
so
because sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say if you take the not wanting to be touched element out, like a lot of science fiction has the same exact things. There's a character who's in this emotional journey that's very interested in curiosity and unpacking something. They feel a felt sense of fear or agitation at the thing, but we don't necessarily feel that. And another sort of side example of this that I think is funny is a lot of horror film. I mean, not a lot, excuse me, a lot of comedy films or comedy narratives in general are actually very horrific to the person it's happening to.
Oh
But
yeah.
because of the comedy element, you have a sort of sideways connection with the main character instead of a straightforward one. And so you're able to laugh at them in a way that you probably couldn't otherwise.
Well, the creature from the Black Lagoon. If you forget that the creature is supposed to be a monster, then it's almost like a slapstick movie, right? Where they like light this fool on fire and then they try to like blow him up with the dynamite and he keeps coming back. And it's almost like that South Park episode where they're at the camp or whatever and like Jimmy's, nemesis keeps getting, keeps getting foiled in all these different ways. So I think that like yeah, there's also these kind of comedic elements which and going back to the whole genre thing with monsters, I was also thinking about The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. That's a classic piece of literature and it's science fiction, but at the same time you have this antagonist and he's like on this journey and then he comes into contact with these monstrous creatures and then he has to navigate that. So, I mean, yeah, Carol would say that, yeah, that's sci-fi, but at the same time, when we're talking about going back and when we talk about some of these kind of timeless monster characters, they're going to show up in genres other than horror.
Yeah, they definitely are. And I mean, I think Carol would say to you, well, it's science fiction because the entire thing isn't about the main character's curiosity of unpacking this one monster. And so I
Okay.
think that would be the thing he would say is like there are many monsters, not just one. And that's really where we're looking at is like, there's the Morlocks, I think, and they're horrifying, but they're
Yeah.
only in
Right.
one time period he goes to.
Sure. Okay.
And so it's always going to come back to this whole element of being connected to that one character. So like the one character has to feel all these things because that one character is the place that we can track the author's intent. And so if the main character isn't horrified by the monster and isn't completely horrified by the monster in a way that they have to like unpack it and figure it out and fight it and all that stuff, then Carol's going to go, well, it's something else.
Sure. Sure.
But one thing that's interesting is you're talking about this comedic thing. Something that's been popping in my head is a bunch of episodes of South Park that hit
Oh
all the
yeah.
structural beats of a horror film, have the
Yes.
character identification, and you still think it's stupid. And
Yeah.
the one that I'm thinking of the most is the one with the ferns, where they're kind of making fun of. I feel like they're making fun of the runes in that movie. I don't know. I'd have to listen to the commentary on it, but um, the goth girl is
Oh yeah, when they
deeply
turn him emo. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah,
she's deeply afraid of becoming emo. And so she's
yeah.
scared. And then she's scared of like this school that's going to make him do that. And then when they find out it's the plant, then she's horrified of that. And then,
Yeah.
like the thing that's so funny is at the end, she finds out that it's like all fake, but then she still has
Yeah.
to have the like unpacking experience to like come back
I
because
know.
like her accepting that it like was that easy for her to go from goth to emo is actually more horrifying to her than the entire narrative that happened. But that entire narrative does follow all of the things that we're talking about with Carol. Like the monster is possible, like it's possible to brainwash people, right? Sort of, maybe. It's impure, particularly for the goth girl, because emo is impure in general. But there's an impurity to it that is going to like take your identity from you. She doesn't want it to touch her. And we're tracking her throughout the entire narrative. So I would say something that's very interesting if you want to unpack more of the comedy thing is just how much South Park does that because they hit all the
Oh
beats.
yeah.
According to Carol, we would have to say that episode is a horror episode.
Sure. Well, but they also had the episode where the serial killers are the Three Stooges in the bakery. You know what
Yeah,
I'm saying?
but again, it's like we have to keep in mind that audience identifying with the main character. So in the one with the
Sure.
serial killers, the main character in that episode is Satan or possibly Satan's cohort because that's the
Oh
episode
right, yeah,
about
yeah, yeah.
Satan's like Sweet
The
16.
Sweet 16 and Biggie Smalls coming through the mirror. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But what I'm really thinking about are episodes where the main character is afraid the whole time, but it's still goofy as hell. Like I think in the first season of South Park, there's that episode where um, the the people accidentally get embalmed with Worcestershire sauce and then they become zombies.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
like
I forgot all about that.
that
Yes.
episode that episode is clearly a horror narrative in Carol's model, but it's so stupid and goofy, like and particularly because it like the comedic element of it is the way that they break the structure there. Like they went, oh well, it is possible that you could embalm somebody with Worcestershire sauce, but the idea that that would make somebody a zombie is so stupid.
Well, they also had the parody of Dawn of the Dead, where the homeless people are zombies as well, and
Yeah,
it all follows all the beats as the same way.
yeah, and I think that might be something we should consider talking about. Maybe do a whole episode on like comedic branches of this, because there are different comedy shows that do this where they hit all the beats of a horror film or a horror narrative, but it's so stupid and goofy that it can't possibly be horrific. And so it meets all of Carol's definitions of what a horror genre, like a horror narrative is, but we can't experience it that way. That might be an
Right.
interesting postmodern take to look at as we get towards the end of the season. Because
So
even
to
if
wrap
we
it,
just talked about South Park, there's lots of those
oh,
episodes.
yeah, we could have a whole podcast dedicated to unpacking South Park and all of the innuendos and references that they do in that
Yeah,
show.
but I mean, even just the horror elements, because there's like a
Right.
just like a horror episode in like every season,
Yeah.
though not all of them hit the beats. Like for instance, there's the episode in season 3 where Corn has the Corn's groovy pirate ghost mystery or whatever,
Oh yeah.
where
Yeah.
Corn comes to town, and then
Yeah.
there's that person is trying to do trying to scare everybody. And I don't want to ruin the episode for people, but somebody is trying to scare people by making these spooky pirate ghosts. And it ends up being more like an episode of Scooby-Doo. And
Hmm.
that's another thing that's interesting is Scooby-Doo is more of a mystery than
Well,
a
yeah, and that's
horror.
and that's the thing is that Carol's definition, I think, also lends itself to true crime, mystery, these kind of whodunit stories,
It does.
which we wouldn't say are horror,
Right.
uh, like Agatha Christie, for example.
Yeah. And the one thing that's missing though is that the main character isn't feeling the horror, right? Because in a mystery, the main character is unpacking it, and it's fully about the unpacking. And that's kind of where I was saying earlier. to me, it feels like a horror is a subgenre of mystery in the way that Carroll is
Sure.
defining it, because he's
Sure.
saying essentially it is a mystery narrative, but it's a specific type of mystery narrative where somebody feels this specific type of horror in this very specific way because it's a monster,
Right. And it
right?
revolves
And like
around the monster.
and thinking about something like Scooby-Doo or Corn's Groovy Pirate Ghost Mystery, the monster actually isn't impure; it's fake,
Right.
and
Yeah.
the fakeness of it is what they're unpacking. Like if
Mhm.
Scooby-Doo was all about Scooby and Shaggy, it would be horror. But this is why they always have to have a
Mm.
foil when Scooby-Doo is there, because
Yeah.
there are different shows like Scrappy Doo and a couple other ones where Scooby-Doo and Shaggy are off doing something. But when they're
Mhm.
off doing something by themselves, it ends up being a horror narrative. Like trying to remember, there's Scooby-Doo and the Reluctant Werewolf, where Shaggy is a race car driver and he gets kidnapped by a vampire who runs like a vampire race.
Okay.
And um, Shaggy gets turned into a werewolf so he can compete in this race. And that is kind of arguably a horror narrative just because Shaggy's the main character, Scooby's the side character. And the only character that's positive is Shaggy's girlfriend, who's like only in that. I forget what her name is because she's like only in that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
this is one of these places. It's like the if the main character isn't feeling that fear, it can't be horror under Carroll's definition. So mysteries and true crime and things like that, unless it's situated in a place where the main character is going through it, it's not going to be horrific in the same way. Because like a true crime narrative, they're all monsters. They're clearly monsters in
Mhm.
Carroll's definition,
Right.
but there's nobody
Right.
that we're tracking the fear of. So like if we made a true
Okay.
crime documentary about a person living their life while somebody was killing people, eventually knowing that they were going to become the victim at the end, then that would be a true crime horror.
Gotcha. So we can almost look at something like the X-Files, where almost every episode focuses on some type of monster, but
Mhm.
Mulder and Scully are not afraid of it. They're unpacking it in this kind of mystery, like detective type story, which is why I've always felt that the X-Files was neither horror or sci-fi. I've always felt like the real genius of the X-Files is that you have Fox Mulder, who's like so good at being a detective that he's able to like solve these crimes that no one else can. It's almost like he's just like the ultimate detective, and that's what the story is really about.
Yeah, no, the great thing about the X-Files is they tricked you into watching a police procedural
Yes.
by making it sci-fi. And
Yes,
it's a
exactly.
sci-fi police procedural. That's all it is. And so
Exactly.
but it's fascinating because they took something from one place and moved it to another one. But yeah,
Hmm.
X Files, it would be very difficult to call most of those episodes horror.
Right.
Um,
Or even sci-fi. Because
right.
again, like they're not set in like a futuristic or like fantasy type setting like space. And Mulder and Scully are not afraid of the monsters, like ever.
Yeah, definitely. And thriller movies like play with this a lot
Hmm.
because the thing about a thriller movie is it starts out not a horror film and then becomes one often. Not always, but often.
Exactly. Exactly. Well,
Um,
and the pacing is different too. I went into a ton of this with my book because I was like, okay, do I market my book as a horror movie, as a horror novel, or as a thriller? And so I had to do a lot of like just deep dives into like why publishers want to say it's a thriller versus a horror novel. And a lot of that has to do with the pacing.
Yeah, definitely. And but also too, like a thriller has a tendency to, particularly the ones from the 90s, have a tendency to start as a mystery and then turn into a horror narrative. Like
Hmm.
the movie Seven, for instance. It
Yeah.
starts out as a straightforward, like police procedural, kind of standard order police
Hmm.
mystery. But what happens is that Brad Pitt's character gets more and more bothered by what's going on.
Right.
And as he gets more and more bothered by what's going on, then we slide into the horror element. And it's same with movies like Copycat, where
Hmm.
she's a criminal profiler and she's not really afraid, but then he like attacks her and then she is
Yeah.
afraid. And then somebody else comes and does that same thing to her later after she's gotten rid of her fear. And so thriller often plays with the fear element, but again, for Carol at least, a horror film from beginning to end is about this one character's fear, And so like that's why we always have like the last girl, and there's always like the main character, and their character is afraid. I think a place where
Sure.
we start to bend this is when the monster isn't so clear. Like for instance, there's a movie called Fall from 2022. I don't know if you've seen it or not, but it's
Mm-mm.
it's about these three people who really like rock climbing. It's a woman, her husband, and her best friend. And at the beginning of the movie, the three of them are climbing something, and her husband loses his footing and dies.
Okay.
And so the main character gets really suicidal and depressed, and she's just having a horrible time in life. And the other character, her best friend, like after the husband dies, goes off and does other things. And then she comes back and tries to get the wife to go climb this ridiculous radio tower in like the middle of the desert. And so the entire movie is about the fear of falling and death. And so it's essentially gravity is the
Mm.
monster.
Okay.
But it's weird in a way because gravity, you could say it's possible, right? You don't want it to
Sure.
touch you because you don't want it to like pull you to your death.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
But it's weird. It's not impure, and that's a thing. It's like it's gravity is pure. It's like you can't be
Right.
like, oh,
Yeah.
gravity is impure just because I'm high. It's like, no, you're an idiot who climbed high. So in a sense, you could kind of say that like the people who are stupid enough to climb the radio tower are their own monsters, but that ends up kind of deconstructing all this in too much of a way. But um,
Yeah.
just something for us to think about is like we really have to be clear on those couple of criteria just to make sure that we're talking about the same thing. Because again, you could say like, hey, gravity's a monster. This movie's clearly a horror movie, but it's not. Gravity can't be impure.
No, well, and natural disaster movies are like that too. Like Volcano, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're definitely afraid of the volcano and it's about their fear of the volcano, but the volcano can't be impure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it can't. And so
No.
it's like it's a horror narrative, but it's not this thing that like can necessarily be unpacked by like getting rid of this monster. It's like the volcano is just going to come, and what you have to
Right.
do is not die.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so it's a again a different narrative. So
Yeah.
all this works out in that way, but we really need to keep in mind that for Carol, a monster has all of those criteria, and the monster is intimately related to the main character who is afraid of that monster. And we are supposed to have the same experience, at least that's what the author intends.
Right. We want to identify with the characters who are afraid of the monster, and then we want to almost like embody their fear, but in this kind of, like standoffish, removed way, where we're like,
Exactly.
oh shit, it's possible I identify with their fear, but because it isn't happening to me directly, then I'm getting this like entertainment value out of it.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's not happening to you directly, you're able to have the experience and see like a value in it. Whereas if it was happening
Right.
to you, you'd just be scared of your fucking mind. And you'd be like, no, stop, don't kill me.
Right. So,
And
to wrap things up, in the next episode, we're going to talk about some common monsters throughout the history of horror genres. And we're going to kind of run them through this formula of Carol and try to say, okay, like we've talked about what a monster is, and here are all of the ones that kind of fit into his definition and why. And then that's what that's going to do is set us up going forward to kind of look at these more obscure things like, uh, for example, like the movie Stigmata. We could say, well, is God a monster? Or some of these kind of outliers. And then, hopefully we'll be able to really say, okay, does Carol hold up in 2026 or not?
yeah, and I mean, if nothing else, we'll be able to say, does his definition of monsters hold up? Like, is it accurate for all the different types of monsters? And I think that's going to be a really fascinating thing to get into because, as we've already unpacked, he's dead right on some, and then others it's ambiguous, and we'll start to see if there are places that he just can't meet anything.
Sure. Well, I think we'll sign off for today. If you like what you heard and saw, tell your friends about us. If you hated what you heard and saw, then tell your enemies about it. We get views either way, so we don't really give a
Yeah,
fuck. And also, if you are interested in any of my publications or my band, the Sten Hall Effect, the links to that are in the description. And if you are interested in booking a coaching session with the talented and lovely Mr. Howard, all of his information is also in the description. Bye for now, and in the immortal love words of Don Cornelius, peace and soul.
That's right.
Yeah.
Buy D.H. Hyde's book. Buy D.H. Hyde's book. See you later.